Welcome to Earnhardt, a NASCAR podcast that takes a deep dive into Earnhardt, the Amazon Prime docuseries. I'm Ryan McGee from ESPN, and over the course of this podcast series, we'll unpack the stories, the moments, the impact of the Intimidator, the man in black, one tough customer. I'm talking about Dale Earnhardt Sr., the man who became a legend and a legacy that shaped generations, from exclusive interviews with family members and racing legends to untold stories left on the cutting room floor. This is your all-access pass to the world of Earnhardt. In the world of auto racing, few names carry the weight or the heart of Earnhardt. And if there's anyone who knows what it means to carry that name, the weight of it, the privilege of it, it's Kelley Earnhardt. Not only is she Dale's daughter and Dale Jr.'s sister and mentor, but she is a powerhouse in her own right. An executive, always on all the top 10 most powerful executives lists in the garage, a mentor, and someone who's been at the center of the family story, both on and off the track. To kick off this series, I sat down with Kelley to talk about her father's legacy, what it was like growing up with that last name, and quite frankly, looking like her father, and how the family has navigated both the spotlight and the shadows. Here's our conversation. All right, Kelley Earnhardt, thank you for making the time for us. And we've known each other for a little while. My first question is something I've already asked your brother. How did you do this? Because you guys have always lived your life in the spotlight, and you kind of lived your life as this open book, whether you wanted to or not. But watching that back, all I could think, as someone who knows you, is how in the world were you able to be as open and honest as you were about some really, really difficult topics?
Yeah, I think just to me that kind of goes along with the idea of why this documentary, why now, and being so transparent, right? That we were given an incredible idea by the Imagine team and an incredible piece of content to look at as they were interested in doing this project. And we knew from the very onset that in order for it to tell the story as they described that they wanted to tell, that, part of the process would be to be very honest about, our life. My dad's been celebrated in a lot of different ways, and we love to celebrate Dad. We're very thankful for the legacy that we have to carry on in the sport, and what we do through JR Motorsports and through Dale and his career. So, what made that possible is just time, I think. As adults, we mature, we grow, we both have families, we both have kids that we want to tell about their grandfather and learn more about them, and spouses and all of that kind of thing. So I think just, the maturity and experiences of our adult life made space to talk about some of the things that we experienced throughout our childhood and whatnot.
Well, I worked with your brother on his book years ago, and I remember you and I talked one day at Carson's shop, and you were already telling me you're starting to work on your book, which I love. And you open your book about your relationship with your dad. That point I made earlier about kind of living your life as this open book, whether you wanted to or not. When I've asked y'all before about, well, what's it like, when people come up and hand you these, you're like, we don't know any other way. So what's it like when you kind of showing the home movies to the world in this documentary?
Well, it feels a little uncomfortable, to be quite honest. There's a level of vulnerability that you have to talk about some of the things and share some of the things, and then have a shield and a resilience to be able to accept feedback and comments, right? So and reactions to it. But honestly, the entire story, all 4 episodes, Imagine did such a great job from beginning to end with the story. And that's kind of what we wanted to tell the story from Dad from the beginning. So you have my aunts in there, and you have, conversation about, why my dad wanted to race and how he started and what that life was like, because I don't know that story. And then the story of like us and moving in with him in childhood, and then you've got several of the Goodwrench guys in there, Kurt and Chocolate and others, talking about those years, and friends like Hank Parker Sr. For me personally, hearing the other people talk about my dad was, I mean, really kind of therapeutic in a way,
Hmm.
because Dale and I are very open that, dad wasn't the I love you kind of guy to us. We were held at a standard that he wanted, and it wasn't lovey chummy. Wasn't today's parenting world, right?
Right.
There's a lot of differences in today's parenting world than those of days past. And we it did me some good to hear Hank Parker Sr. talk about the fact that my dad opened up to him about not being able to say I love you and why, and things like that. So it helped answer a few questions, and some questions won't ever be answered because we don't have dad here to talk about things. But when we lost him, there was a lot of things left undone, unsaid, so on and so forth, that you can't get back when you lose a person. So hearing all those stories and hearing their perspectives, I mean, I was a kid, and an immature adult, in some of those eras. And so just hearing it as a more mature, experienced adult did me a lot of good.
I've used this phrase a lot when I've talked about this documentary, which this is a gift. I mean, the things that you and your brother are sharing, and the things, I mean, Hank Parker, he sounded like a psychiatrist. He was
I
unbelievable, right?
know, I
Right.
know, I
But,
know.
but it's interesting to me because it sounds like it was a gift for you. I mean, I lost my mother
Yeah,
years ago. The greatest gift ever is when somebody tells me a story I haven't heard, or I see a
yeah,
picture I've never seen before.
yeah.
Was it like that for you?
Yeah, it was. And the thing is, like, we got to hear all kinds of stories from race fans and people and so on, from the time of dad's passing, really, which is also a weirdness, because you're having people tell you, like, I'll talk with fans and whatnot, and they'll say, oh, I just, I was out of work for a week, I cried, I didn't do this, I can't do that, I couldn't do this. And they're talking to me, the daughter who lost their dad. And I'm like, yeah, and it's a weird position to be put in to figure out how to respond and what things are going through your head, of the same way you felt during that time, right? But really, you said that best. I love that. This whole thing, that it is a gift. And Dale spoke about, we lost our mom, 6 years ago to cancer, and we had a few months to know that the time was coming to an end. And so we had a few months to ask questions, and we did. We wanted her perspective on things that your parents just wouldn't share these things with you
Hmm.
on a normal basis, right? They're not going to tell you about what messed up in their relationship or how things were or whatever. But she knew she was going to pass, and these were questions we asked, and she respected the fact that we wanted to know. And so, but you don't get that opportunity, and we didn't get that opportunity in dad's situation, with it being, uh, you know, just right there, right then, right. Nobody expected that. So
Well, one of the things you are, I always say this too. There's certain things you didn't share as a parent in the '70s, right?
yeah,
Which is when you and I were both born and raised. But
yeah.
but the story of your family, and I think imagine an amazing job of, here's Dale Earnhardt working his way up the ladder, and then here's Dale Earnhardt's people, trying to work
Yeah.
their way through life.
It's the
Um,
relationships that were weaved in,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but you talk about your mother. Um, when the fire happens and you have to move in with Dale. And I was struck by when you talked about, I didn't really have a lot of memories of Teresa till the wedding, right? I mean, and there we are. So when you lay these things bare for people, what's it like for you to go back and watch that, and the conversations that you've had, with Dale over all these years, and certainly after you saw the way this story was told?
That I've learned, and this helped me when I wrote my book, and it's actually what the publishers told me when I was working through what the book would be about is that, every one of us have our own experience going through something. So going through my dad's life, my experience, only Kelley owns that experience. I own my thoughts. I own my feelings. I own the way I reacted to things. However I felt about what was going on in my world, that's mine. It's not yours. It's not anybody else's for the taking or for figuring out or for judging or anything else. And so I really got comfortable with that thought process, that that's okay. That my experience is my experience. I can't change or help that that's the way I felt. And Dale and I both had different experiences, raised under the same roof. We reacted differently to things. We felt different about things. And that's okay and great. Right. So, I just, in watching that, I just have to keep reminding myself of that. And even when I'm watching other people speak about dad, there's a level of jealousy at times when other people who got more time with my dad than I did in more relaxed, fun situations. When I hear Michael Waltrip talk about being in the Bahamas with my dad on multiple occasions and fishing, and I hear hunting stories, and I hear a lot of different stories like that. There's a level of jealousy because I didn't get to experience that with my dad. I didn't get to go hunting with my dad. I didn't get to go. I went on one trip to the Bahamas and that was it. But but I have to remember that's their experience. That was the relationship that they had with my dad. And while I'm hurt that I didn't get to have that relationship, I just have to make space that that it is what it is, and accept it for that. So it's just a constant battle of telling yourself that, though, right? Because feelings creep up. We're humans. We're emotional, and I don't want that to get the best of me, and turn that into something negative.
Well, and to that point, your mother had to leave. Your dad's on the road all the time. Teresa's doing the business and going to the racetrack or whatever. What we see in this film is we see a little girl who is playing the role of a mother.
When Dad went out of town to a race with Teresa, we had nannies that lived in the house with us. And man, we missed Mom. We missed Mom terribly. So Kelley and I latched on each other in this time. She was always looking out for me, making sure that I had lunch money, or if she heard an argument, coming in the room after everything had settled down, are you okay?
I mean, he and I, mainly me, looked out for him, but he was my support person. Because we didn't really have that safe, secure person in our house.
When you think about that, was that just, all right, this is what I've got to do? I mean, what
Yeah.
was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I can't say, like as I was going through it, it didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel unusual. It wasn't like a load to carry, probably primarily because I had an immature brain about it, right? But I'm an Enneagram 2, so I have this feeling that I need to be needed, and that's what makes me happy, right? So I like to make other people happy. I like to do things for other people. I like to feel needed by other people, and so it's sort of my nature, probably because of some of that childhood stuff, right? And so it is, it didn't feel. It just felt like what I should do, when all that was happening with us moving and having the fire. And even before the fire, my mom worked third shift, and, some of it you just had to do,
Mm-hmm.
or you might not eat or whatever it was, right? You had to figure it out on your own,
So I've never asked you this question, but
Okay.
when people talk about you, the stories I always hear are, well, she's an amazing businesswoman, and she looks after her brother, and all these things. but everybody's all, and how about her like voluntarily going to military school?
I never really heard from Dad or Teresa at military school. And then one day I walk outside and my sister walks up and she's wearing the shit. She's a student. My mind could not register what I was seeing. I'm like, what are you doing? And she goes, I'm here. I missed you.
I made the choice to go because I wanted to take care of Dale. He was this scrawny, little, skinny, we used to call him chicken legs. Even in military school, it was like kid, Dale. So I had to go there and protect him because I didn't have a clue what was gonna go on at military school, but I figured that he wasn't gonna be able to handle it without me.
Walk me through this process of it. One of my favorite excerpts from the entire documentary is when Dale goes, I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, and she's wearing the stuff. So
I love that too.
It's so great. But what was that? Tell me why, and what was that experience like for you? Because we don't really hear about your part of that.
Yeah, gosh, I went to military school a couple weeks after Dale was there. I wish I could remember, the exact scenario of why I wanted to go there, but it was clearly the decision was only for Dale to go there, because we took him there, and I continued at the Christian school that we were at, and I don't recall the specific incident where maybe I said I wanted to go, or maybe I was missing him and acting out, and they said, "Hey, do you want to go too?" I wish I did. I think that sometimes trauma in our life blocks out things, right? So I need to go to one of those therapists where they get into your brain and pull all that stuff out. I just imagine that, in the time frame, because that was ninth grade. So we had been at our dad's a good 6 years, and so I can just imagine that, my thought process was, I got to be with him, right? Like I had been looking after him from in public school and going through, it was hard sometimes to go to public school and have people talking terrible about your parent, and how he was on the racetrack or whatever people thought, or them calling you names, because they thought you were spoiled and had no idea what was, going on in our house and what level of spoiledness we were at or not at. And so Dale and I were just so close and always leaned on each other, because if our parents were traveling, we didn't have the relationship with Dad where we could just go tell Dad and Teresa what was going on or how we felt or whatever. And so, when we were kept by nannies or our family, and we had live-in nannies mostly, who were to follow strict rules and do these different things. And so I just imagined that I was going to be most comfortable and feel better if we were together and I could know what was going on with him and he could know what was going on with me. But I don't remember the exact circumstance when that took place, And my parents were probably like, hey, it's easier if both of them are up there.
You got to deal with it, right? Yeah, right.
But we're having to worry about Kelley at home on this weekend, and Dale's at, logistics were a lot easier.
Well, and I pictured in my mind the way Dale explains it, like that movie Never Been Kissed. Like Drew Barrymore worked so hard to be cool and couldn't do it, and then her brother just shows up and it's just cool. The way Dale described it, you just showed up, right, and you just jumped right in, and you were popular.
But it was probably that way for him because, probably nobody from a military school perspective, I don't think they pulled him aside and said, hey, you know what, your sister's coming up here or whatever. It's just like you show up, you get there and you go, hey, I'm here.
But you also, after military school, you did something that, and your dad talked to me about this, about how his dad was mad at him for quitting school. Right. And Richard Childress has always wished he'd stayed in school. But you went to college, Tell me about the decision to do that. And I think we both come from families where generations of people just worked at the mill, didn't go to college. And then the one who does, that's you.
My dad, preached that all the time, that he wanted us to go to school, he wanted us to finish school, and he wanted me specifically to go to college. I don't know that, Dale talks about the art school and all, which was a fun subject of a lot of people's questions yesterday. But, I just always remember, you're going to go to college, make good grades, da, 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 da. And I always did. I had a great report card. I did well in school. And decided to go to college. It's funny. I think about the process of being involved with my kids and their college choices and the applications. I did all that stuff on my own. I remember going to high school and to the guidance counselor at the high school, and just, I didn't know which college to go to. I just knew I'd go in North Carolina. I was like, you know what? I've heard that this school was cool and fun. I've heard this school, well, this would be fun to go to the beach or whatever. And, I just applied to some schools and got accepted and chose which one to go to. I moved myself to school myself. I drove myself after I graduated high school, got in my Z24, packed it up, and drove myself to Wilmington, 4 hours away. And my mom met me there from Virginia, and helped me move. I went to summer school. I wanted out of the house so bad that I went to summer school before I even started college in August. And just and I say all that because, like, for my kids, I wanted to be involved in what schools. I wanted to hear why they wanted to go to certain schools. We, wanted to just be part of that process and understand the whys and where you're going to live and what's this going to look like and all these kinds of things, and none of that ever happened for us in our home. It was with our mom, obviously she cared, she met me there, but, it was weird.
Your whole life has just been, all right, I'm just going to figure this out. That's all. When I think about you all the time, it's just, I'm just going to figure this out, and you figured it out.
Yeah. But, I think that also, that's not, I don't look at any of this stuff and regret, or I am a very firm believer that, all of the circumstances that I've been put through to work towards and to go through another one, right? Or something's being set up for the future of whatever that is. I'm a firm believer in that. And, I say that just even about going to work for Dale and why I wasn't a race car driver. I had talent. And I didn't get the opportunity to go as far as others, but now I can see why. We're going to lose our dad. I go to college, I get my degree, I work in the business, I do all these things, and then I'm able to come in here and do that. So I'm just a real firm believer that I don't look back and go, I wish it was a different way. I don't even say that. I don't say that about my dad. I miss my dad. I wish my dad was here because I miss my dad. But man, my life would look different. My life would look so different. I wouldn't be, Dale and I probably wouldn't have this, JR Motorsports, did the different things. It just would look different, and I don't know what it would look like, but I know it would look different. And I like my life, I like what I've experienced and all those kinds of things. So,
yeah, well, and I don't want to give it away, but a point that you make in this documentary, as we kind of get to the conclusion is,
yeah,
it was hard, but it's what made you who you are, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that. I believe all those circumstances, have, like you said, made me be able to just work through it, get through it, figure it out, tackle it, whatever it is. And some of that's honest too, genetics, because my dad was built very much in the same way.
Yeah. No, well, I was going to ask you about that too, and I'm going to ask you about your talent as a race car driver in a minute. But you clearly, you look like your dad. Your mannerisms remind me of your dad. You have a business acumen. You have all those things built in. You mentioned briefly about it's kind of hard walking the hallways of the school. When your dad just wrecked Darrell Waltrip at Richmond or whatever. So what's it like? Kind of not being able to hide with the name and with the resemblance and with, you're clearly you're Dale Earnhardt's daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, you deal with it a lot differently when you're an adult. I mean, it was a difficult thing as a kid to, you know, listen to people, like I said, talk negative or call you names or whatever, and or think that your life was a certain way when it wasn't. And I mean, honestly, I dealt with that up until, shoot, Dale probably. I think unconsciously Dale and I sort of dealt with that all the way up to his retirement. That there was a certain standard way, whatever we needed to do to, continue to meet people's expectations. And, once Dale stopped driving, it was like, whew, how we can just be who we are, right? Like there was a level of expectation, that came with Dale that then came with me, honestly, working with Dale. So, yeah, you know, it's, we're seasoned at dealing with it, and it's no big deal, so to speak. I always remember too that, I'll have people ask me, or, stop me at Millbridge to take a picture when I'm out there with my kids racing, or stop you in a grocery store or something. And, I have to just remember that this is our life, and we put ourselves out here, we're out here, and, fans and people that support NASCAR and support racing, that's how all this works, right? So, and that was something that Dad always taught us, right? So, it's not foreign to us at all.
All right, so be honest with me. You said it. I mean, you said you had talent as a race car driver. I saw you run. I want to say it was at Hickory.
Yeah.
I remember going into a mom and pop's and saw the hero cards, and there the three y'all were and everything. All right, be honest with me. How good were you?
I was good at it. I certainly had the stamina and the drive and all of those things. Most of the time people that worked on my race car told me I drove too hard, right? So I wasn't cautious or nervous or anything like that. And, I think I needed to whoa up so that I could go faster.
That sounds
a lot
familiar,
of times.
by the way.
I know.
That's very familiar.
Yeah. And, I just didn't get to live that out, right? I was in college. I started working at Sports Image, and I raced on the weekends. I'm really thankful that Dad let us do all that together, because, I begged to do things like that growing up and as a child, to go hunting with them, or, ride go-karts or do whatever. And so I'm really glad that I got that opportunity to do that. I just didn't get to, see it through. And other, I just also just go off of what other people say. They'll always say, well, you're the best out of the three.
That's it.
And so I'll just own it now. So
yeah,
I
we're all way better than we used to be. So
yeah, for sure.
I say we keep rolling with it. So then what was it like for you? And you mentioned Sports Image, but what was it like for you as you started moving up the business ranks at the same time that your brother started having success? I mean, honestly, it kind of came out of left field for a lot of us,
Yeah.
Covering the Busch Series at the time. And, oh, by the way, your dad's starting, he's growing DEI into a cup team. What was that time in your life like?
I was, I didn't like the fact that I didn't work directly in the, under Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, but, I was told often, sometimes from my dad, but mostly from other people, you're there, you're the eyes and ears, because my dad owned Sports Image. And then after, it merged with Action, just, he was a huge part of it. And, I just always worked really hard to achieve things. I think I don't look back and see myself, seeking the same approval that Dale was seeking, but we did both seek approval. Mm-hmm. We looked for it differently. Dale wanted the approval emotionally, that this connection between him and Dad. I had that connection with Dad. I was good at a lot of stuff, right? Like I didn't need that part of it. I needed the after fact that said, you did really good on that. Like those straight A's you brought home, girl, you kicked ass. No, it was, you better bring straight A's or you're grounded. Right. So, it wasn't the atta girl. And so, I just always wanted to do good. And, I think, I worked hard in my business. At Sports Image, and I was the Rusty Wallace account manager. I did all kinds of things. I got to do a lot of fun stuff, and it always made me feel good that other people, said good job or whatever, whatever was going on. And I worked my way up through different roles, and I flew to Phoenix a lot, and was involved in meetings with Fred Wagonalls and the leadership team. So all of those kinds of things, that makes you feel good as an employee that you're accomplishing something. When we lost Dad, obviously a lot of that changed just with the licensing world and the things Teresa was going through, and the difficulty of kind of sifting through licensing and then want to make all this more stuff. And Teresa was involved with the autopsy photos and putting a hold on a lot of that stuff, rightfully so. And I was caught in kind of the middle of that, like having to listen to them say, well, we can't get this done because Teresa's doing this. And I'm like, she's over there doing some really important work, that I supported. So that was a hard transition, which is one of the reasons that I want to go and work with Dale.
Well, and one thing, and we're going to get to that in just a second, because this is kind of where I get to know you guys when you went to work for Dale. But something I didn't realize, and I don't think a lot of people will probably know until they watch the film, is that you watched the 2001 Daytona 500 on television like most of the world.
Yeah.
And you're honest about being with your family. I mean, that I think about when I lost my mother. People say you'll forget everything. I remember every minute of that day. What is your recollection experience when you think about February 18th, 2001?
Yeah, I had a 5-month-old daughter, was at my grandmother's. My grandmother was such a big help to me when I had Carson. And we were there for Sunday afternoon watching the race. Mama's was a place that you would gather to go and do that. And, we all day we had lunch after church, and, had the baby nap and fed the baby and did all those kinds of things. And then the last lap that happens. And, I just remember us just nervously waiting. But then once you saw, Kenny and the ambulance and how, you can just get the vibe of how things are going, panic kind of set in, and like, we're just wanting someone to call us and tell us something. And Uncle Danny called, and he says, it's not good. It's not good. And we both just are screaming and crying. At this point, others have shown up, and Aunt Kay, Aunt Kathy, etc., because they're all right there together. And, looking back, we were there. I called my in-laws right away, Jimmy's parents, and was like, you have to come get this baby. I don't know what to do. You've got to, I need one thing taken off my plate. And, they drove down from Thomasville and got Carson, and I stayed at my grandmother's, and we were there till like midnight. We just crying and sobbing, and what are we going to do? And how is this possible? And, all the different questions that you say when you lose somebody that you care about so much. And then Dale came. And, the news was out there around Mama's house, and nobody was going, nobody wanted to go out there and address that. And then finally Dale came, and Dale, I remember him standing on my Mama's porch, talking to the media, and, it was just such sorrow, and confusion and shock, and then, but, the next day, we went over to Teresa's that evening, and not a lot of words were said, just I'm sorry, I'm sorry is in the fact that I'm sorry your dad's gone, that kind of thing. After she got back from Daytona, I think she flew back that next day, and we went over there that evening or something like that. And then, yeah, just, life turned to the memorial and the meeting at Dale Earnhardt Incorporated on what they were going to do. I went to that and listened to that. And, meanwhile, I got a 5-month-old baby that
Yeah.
needs something every minute of the day. So, yeah, that was really tough.
And you mentioned too this thing about everyone else, well intentioned, they wanted you to make them feel better, right?
Yeah.
All these
Yeah.
thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of people that are
Yeah.
just showing up at DEI and were there for
Yeah.
weeks, they're wanting you and your brother to make them feel better, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not,
Totally.
and again, they don't mean anything ill by it, but
No.
there's an extra burden there that I don't think people appreciate.
Yeah. Well, they don't understand because not everybody, gets to carry that, and I'm glad they don't, because it's a lot to carry. But you know, uh, you you just try to put yourself in people's shoes. When my mom passed, when people pass, you don't know, do you send a text to them right away, to the person that lost, it's your friend, your family, whatever it is, and what do you say, what are the right words, da 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 da, and I just always think for myself, like, what did I want to hear? And
Mhm.
so, might not be what they want to hear, but I'm just going to go with what I know best, and deal with something. But yeah, that, most of the time, whenever we're going through something like that, we're just all trying to feel better, and we don't realize that maybe we're saying something to the other person that doesn't make them feel so good, or brings up other memories or whatever, or other feelings.
Yeah, everybody keeps saying the same things over and over. And you're like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it, but
Yeah.
if one more
Yeah.
person tells me heaven need
Yeah.
another angel, I'm going to flip
Yeah.
out,
I
right? Oh
know.
yeah,
I
yeah, all
know.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and now as adults and as people that are coming through this grief process, you went to take care of your brother again. You know, the decision to take a significant pay cut and to go work with your brother and to try to build something. What was that like for you?
Well, I knew, we all had a lot of confidence and respect in Dad, shepherding Dale's career, because what better person to have shepherd your career than Dale Earnhardt? And, once we lost him, and just the nature of our relationship with Teresa, we just felt, I certainly felt that we needed to be in protection mode, and defense mode. So, I begged Dale, and all the while, I was working in a business that wasn't going to be that fun anymore. I didn't have my dad's product, and all of that kind of stuff that made that so interesting. So, it took me a really long time to convince Dale, for me to go to work there. When I came out of college in 1995, I made $23,000 a year, and which I thought was a ton,
Oh no, it
back then.
was.
It
No, it
was
was.
great
Yeah,
back
yeah,
then, right? Yeah,
no,
because
it
I had
was.
like
Yeah.
$400 apartment rent, so it was much easier to live in those days. And so $23,000, I made, and I got to action, and I worked my way up to six figures, and so Dale's like, you can't. I can't pay you that. And he said it in an interview the other day, which I thought was funny. He goes, well, I mean, I didn't know how much money I had, because Dad, they were doing everything at Dale Earnhardt Incorporated for him, and so, we finally convinced each other that it would be okay, and that, we'd get paid back tenfold just from the possibility to do that together, and so that's what we did. He finally gave in.
Good thing. It's
Yeah.
worked out, right? So in February, um, when JR Motorsports made it into the Daytona 500, and y'all came in to talk to the media, that's one of my favorite press conferences in years, right? But what was it like for you, and what has it been like for you to build this tremendously successful, not just a race team, but the businesses around the race team?
I mean, it's rewarding. I think that, all of us want to accomplish what we're passionate about, right? the things that you've done and books that you've helped write and your career, in the media and all. We all want to be successful at what we're passionate about, and so I feel like if we weren't successful at this, it would be a big letdown to our family legacy, right? And our what we know as a family. And so I think that pushes us every day to work as hard as we can at it to continue to build the Earnhardt name in our sport, because our sport started with the Earnhardt name with our grandfather. And so I think we'd be really hard on ourselves if we couldn't make this work and couldn't, and it not happen. So I'm super proud of it. And, I love people. And so, our employees, and making a place where they want to come to work and they feel appreciated and they feel valued and all of those things, which is difficult in our sport. One of the things that makes me so proud is if an employee leaves here, usually to further their career, in some fashion with another team, and they'll, tell me months later, JRM really was the best place I've ever worked. And I had to go do this because I wanted to be this, I wanted to be a this person, or I wanted to make more money, or whatever it was. So they had to make that move, but nothing compares. You guys run a place where you value your people. And I love hearing that, because that's like the number one thing. It's not, it's definitely not financial because the model isn't that beautiful, but to hear that and to be part of other people's worlds. And I heard that a lot with my dad. My dad was very engaged with his employees, and knew a lot about what was going on in their life, and did a lot, help them through things and all of those kinds of things, and you hear stories like that all the time. So I know that, we get that honest, the way that we want that to work. But I'm just really proud. I mean, there was no plan. There's still no, plan. There's no 5-year plan out there. It's just that when opportunities present themselves, we take a look to see what works best for us, and to figure out if we can make it happen or not, just like the Cup car. Was it in our cards to do that? But the opportunity presented itself, and we said, okay, how can we make this work? Can we do it? And we decided we could, so we did.
Yeah, there you go again.
That's everything that we've done.
Right? Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Well, all right, so I'll get you out of here on this question.
You're good.
One of the things I love to do is to come up to JR Motorsports and just watch the people like come into the parking lot and the lobby, and they're all like, man, I remember that time your dad did so-and-so at Rockingham or whatever. What is your dad's legacy?
Me just kind of being a man of the people. My dad could make a connection with most anybody. He could command a room. You didn't need to know him. He had this charisma about him with people that just stuck out, and he made people feel comfortable. He made you feel like, that I know he made fans and business people and media people and all of this, like they were very important to the ecosystem of what he was trying to accomplish. And he understood that, so yeah, I think, being a man of the people and connecting with people, really is kind of what his legacy is. And I mean, being a badass, but that's self-described.
that's why they sell the t-shirts, right?
Yeah.
He was good to me once he was done messing with me, which he did for.
What do you think his legacy is? What do you think? How would you describe it?
Well, I just, every sport has to have its heroes. And, what I've always said about your dad is if there was a room of 500 people and everyone was facing in one direction, if he walked in the back door without saying a word, you just turn around. It's like
the air. Yeah.
Exactly. It's in my life, it's like some U.S. presidents and your dad. There just aren't a lot of people that have that kind of weight, And so, in your mind, he's 8 feet tall. Mm-hmm. I still think he might have been. The statue is, but but that's how he felt. But he also, when he wanted to, could make you feel connected. And it sounds like everyone else felt the same way that y'all felt, which is there's the superhero, but then there's also, man, it'd be nice if I'd
This
like
real
to just shake
person.
his hand. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I
Yeah,
appreciate
for
the
sure.
time, and
Hey, you're welcome. You're
genuinely, and
welcome.
the film is so
Yeah, thank
good.
you.
It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Kelley Earnhardt for her openness, her honesty, and her willingness to share with all of us, not just in the film, but in this podcast, about her life and her experience with her father. But to fully understand the story of Dale Earnhardt, you need to hear from the men who raced against him. So next time on Earnhardt, the podcast series, we're going to talk to Rusty Wallace and Kyle Petty, two of Dale's greatest rivals, fiercest competitors, but also two of his best friends. They grew up together on the racetrack as they were racing, becoming men, becoming fathers, and becoming NASCAR legends. We get into the battles, the bravado, the moments that defined that era of NASCAR, the 80s and the 90s, like no other. You will not want to miss it. So be sure to follow and stream Earnhardt on Amazon Prime Video. I'm Ryan McGee. Thanks for riding along with us.